Hi, everyone. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to say to you, yay, the podcast Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin is celebrating its third birthday. So happy birthday to the podcast. And we've made it this far because of you and how you take your time to listen in. And I always say, and I always will, we really appreciate you for listening in. And recently we started a YouTube channel to put the podcast there too. So if you would, as a birthday gift to us, go over and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin. It'll help us get the YouTube channel off the ground and continue to grow it and hopefully reach out to more people. So thank you so much. And now let's get to the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and that you take time to listen into the podcast or now watch the podcast on YouTube. And because you have been faithful and listening in, we have been ranked one of the top podcasts of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. All right. So today we're having a solo episode. So it's just me. Often I interview others, but every now and then I'll have an episode where it's just me talking with you. So today is one of those times. All right, so we're going to be talking about today how to renew your joy at work. How to renew your joy at work. You know, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So if you or you know someone who is struggling with their work and they're feeling like, just going through the motions, every day and they're not sure what to do. Well, the good news is I'm going to help you today learn how to renew your joy at work. And you don't have to necessarily leave your job. Some people might be considering a job move, and that's okay. Either way, this can work whether you want to stay in your job or you want to use this somewhere else. Okay. All right. So if you've been listening to me for a while, you probably heard me share this story, but I will share it again for those who haven't heard it, and maybe a refresher for those who have. This passion that I have around people having meaning and purpose and joy in their work comes directly out of my own life experience and my own story of listening to my mother growing up. I would hear her share this story over and over again. And later, when I got a little older, I realized the impact of it. Then I was pretty much annoyed. Oh, we heard this story before, we're going to hear it again. But when I grew older, I realized that it was very significant to her, which is why she recounted it all the time. And she would talk about how when she was in high school, she had a dream of going to college and being a teacher, becoming a teacher. So when it was time to talk about college, she talked with her parents and she realized that she was not going to be able to go to college. There were so many, they had like 13 of them all together, and they couldn't afford to send all of them to college. So they had a plan. They said, well, we'll try to get the boys to college because, they'll have families and they'll have to take care of the families. And the women will marry men and the men will take care of them. So that was the thinking of the time, right? So that was the plan they had for her. And so she didn't go to college. And she started working and she ended up working in a factory for 35 years and hating it. And I say this all the time. There's nothing wrong with working in a factory if you say, hey, this is meaningful for me because it's given me the income to care for my family. There's nothing wrong with that. But for her, it went against her personality, the core of who she was. It just was not in alignment with who she was. And I think that is what caused her misery and why we had to hear the story over and over again. But seriously, though, I could see then and even later as I grew older, the impact of that on her life. She had a lot of what they would call back then stomach issues, but they would call them ulcers. Yeah, ulcers. I don't know. Have you heard of that yet? So they called them ulcers. She had ulcers because I think she was under so much stress at the job because, again, it was against who she was. And then she would have bouts of depression, and I saw the impact up close and the pain of that. And so she never did. That was her life. She retired from that work. And as I saw that, I always had in the back of my mind, but early on as in high school, I declared, if I can have work, a job, a career that had meaning and purpose and was fulfilling to me, if it was at all possible, I was going to do that. And I did. Lost sight of it right after college, but I found it. Took me like 20 years, literally. It took me 20 years of trial and error and spending time in this career and that career. You may have heard this story, and I'll probably share it on more episodes. But anyway, it took me 20 years, probably a little over 20 years, to find the thing that was meaningful and purposeful and in my alignment with myself and my purpose. And by the way, it's not just one job. It's how you express yourself. It's being true to your whole self. And so we're going to talk about one of those today. And this is what I would consider the number one way. There's a combination, but this is a number one way to renew that joy and get at that sense of purpose in your work. And you can do it in your work today, or you can do it, if you're thinking about moving into another career. All right, so let's jump in. And you probably heard me talk about this before, but I'm going to frame what I'm talking about in the work of Gay Hendricks and his book, The Big Leap. And in his book, he talks about there are 4 zones of activity that we generally operate in our work. 4 zones. And he lists them, and I'm going to talk about them in a moment. But let me say this. The one that we're going to emphasize here today is called the zone of genius, if you haven't heard of it. Some have. It became popular in certain circles. So we'll talk about that. But in my work, I build on his work to talk about some other areas. But for our purposes today, we're just going to focus on the zone of genius. Okay? All right. So he says there are 4 areas of activity. You can think about them like categories, buckets of activity that we typically work in. And the first one is the zone of incompetence. And these are activities that fall under the category of things that you're just not good at. And so he says, and I agree with him, to the extent that you can, delegate those. Don't spend any time in those activities that you're just not good at. Delegate them. The second zone is the zone of competence. So you can do it. It's all right. But so can lots of other people. And he says, and I agree again, it's not worth your time to just doing activities that are just sort of meh. So that was the zone of incompetence, the zone of competence. All right, so now we're moving on to the zone of excellence. Now, the activities that fall in the zone of excellence are the activities that you're really good at. I mean, you're really good at and better than most people. And you could do them, I make a joke, somebody could wake you up in the middle of the night and say, do this thing, and you can just do it, right? So like, I feel for me, communication comes easily to me. Maybe, I think so. If somebody woke me up at 3:00 in the morning and said, hey, do a podcast interview. I think I could do it okay. I mean, I could do it well. So anyway, zone of excellence, things that you're really good at, but you still have this feeling like it's sort of just very comfortable and easy, right? And there's a little bit more, there's more that you can do, but this is sort of where it's safe. Other people kind of applaud you for it in this area. They recognize you for it. And it's sort of your safety zone and you excel in it. That's the zone of excellence. And the tricky part about that is often people get stuck there. They get stuck there because it is easy and other people do recognize it. But there's something in the back of your mind saying, I know I could do a little more. I can do something different. So again, it doesn't have to be a whole job switch. These are activities that fall in the category of these particular zones, categories, buckets, right? All right, so now we'll go on to the zone of genius. This is the one where he says, and I agree, to strive for spending most of your time doing these activities. And you might have to start, with the short amount of time, 10 minutes a day, and gradually move up until you get to the point where over half of your activities, your work activities, fall in the category of zone of genius. All right, so here's your zone of genius activities. Activities that include skills, abilities that you do, and when you do them, the time goes by so fast. Like you just didn't even realize, wow, it's lunch already? Well, for me, I forget lunch, but you get the idea. You like the time is just, you just can't believe it, right? Or here's another indicator. You're very energized. You just have so much energy. You could be doing something else at that same time and feel just bored and just low energy. You feel like you're tired. And then if you're suddenly introduced to doing this other activity, you suddenly have energy. And I'll give you an example from my life. I was doing a work meeting. I was scheduled for a work meeting. And I seriously thought that, oh my gosh, I'm just so tired. I didn't get enough sleep. I just don't even know if I have energy for this meeting, right? And so the meeting starts at 1 o'clock. We get on the call. For some reason, people didn't show up, just that one person. So the two of us said, well, do we really need to meet? No, we don't need to meet. We can reschedule. We don't know what happened with the other people. We'll just cancel the meeting. Oh my goodness. I thought, oh, in the beginning, I thought I would now be able to take a nap. But immediately when I got off the call, I was so energized because I started doing something that was really in my zone of genius. And I was like, wow, that had nothing to do with my fatigue and feeling like I needed more sleep or rest. I was not doing the right activity, the activity that energized me. So the activities that fall under that category, those are the activities that are in your zone of genius. And you might say, well, how do I know? How do I know? Well, start paying attention. Just you'd be surprised what you could learn by just turning your awareness and your attention to your day. Look at the things you enjoy. Look at the things like I just mentioned, where you're feeling drained versus where you're feeling energized. And pay attention, take a note, make a list. And it may be activities that are using a particular skill. Like for me, typically, if it has something to do with communication, that could be oral communication, written communication, certain types. When I'm learning something new or teaching something, those are activities that energize me, but I can use them in different areas. So just kind of pay attention to your day. Look at those activities that you're doing and see which ones energize you. And then commit yourself to doing at least 10 minutes. Maybe you can be doing a whole hour, but at least 10 minutes a day doing one of those activities. Increase that gradually as the days go on till you get to a point where you can operate in those activities over 50% of your time. So that's the goal. And if you can really get to 70%, that would be golden. So now, okay, so after hearing this, you might say, well, I don't know. I still don't know how I could really find my zone of genius. Well, I have recorded what I call a strategy session to help you think through some more ways that you can discover your zone of genius. And I put that over on the website, the podcast website. So you can go there, download it for free, listen to it, make some more notes, and try to get into your zone of genius. All right. And you can find that at leadershippurposepodcast.com. leadershippurposepodcast.com. All right. So just head over there, get the free audio. I'd love to hear how you're doing. Send me an email, robin@leadershippurposepodcast.com. And by the way, you can send me an email about anything you want, and I'll be happy to hear from you. In the meantime, head on over and rate, subscribe to the podcast to help us keep going and reaching out to more and more people. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.